Today, I'll tell you the story of how it happened, how one political force methodically, over decades, took over all the institutions of power, how this led to a conspiracy that almost destroyed democracy from within, and most importantly, why I still have reasons for optimism. Stay until the end, ladies and gentlemen, because the finale will surprise you. A stronghold of the left. Let's start with a simple question. Where do smart young people go after university? If you're a Republican, a conservative, someone who believes in the free market, the answer is probably obvious. Into business, private practice, entrepreneurship. That's where the money and freedom are and where you see results pretty much right away. If you're a Democrat, if you're a progressive, if you're someone who believes that the government should manage people's lives because it's smarter and will do things right, the answer is also obvious. Into government. Into the prosecutor's office, into regulatory agencies, into a university, into a newspaper editorial office. Why? That's where the power is, that's where the influence is, that's where you can change the world in the desired direction, from the top down. This isn't a conspiracy, ladies and gentlemen, it's simply the logic of beliefs. And this is what happens when this logic operates for 30, 40, 50 years in a row. Federal prosecutors. Career prosecutors in Washington, people who stay in their positions under any administration, statistically vote for Democrats at a ratio of about 9-1. This is not my opinion, these are the results of analyses that have already been conducted several times. Courts. Federal judges are appointed for life. The Democratic administration, administrations have been filling judicial seats relentlessly, and Republicans did so only intermittently through compromises. Now universities, just a breeding ground. According to research in the humanities and social sciences, for every Republican professor, and he may still be to a large extent what we call, there are 8 to 12 Democratic professors. But I have to congratulate you. At Ivy League universities, the ratio is even more extreme. Why did it turn out this way? After World War II, intellectuals, a significant number of whom became disillusioned with communism. Not with socialism, with communism. But they absolutely retained their collectivist instincts. They went into teaching. They raised the next generation, which raised the next generation. Private business. They didn't hire people with radical views. They hired people who delivered results. But in universities, they hired people with radical views. There, radical views were an advantage. Now the mass media, the most painful one, right? According to polls of journalists at major American outlets, Democrats outnumber Republicans by a ratio of 7-1. Well, interaction, it depends on the publication, but everyone says it's 10-1. Do you think this doesn't affect what they write? Of course it does. So the FBI, CIA, and other three-letter agencies, that's a separate story. Formally, these are apolitical organizations. In reality, by 2016, they were filled, packed with people who had been building their careers for decades. The administration, where the politically correct view was considered to be the left-centrist worldview, at best, centrist. The result. By the middle of 2010, the United States reached a situation where, despite having a formally two-party system, the government apparatus was deeply, structurally, and tilted to one side in terms of personnel. This isn't a conspiracy or a conspiracy theory, it's statistics. Personnel statistics. A conspiracy. Now, pay attention, I'm not going to tell you that there definitely was a conspiracy. We also need to define what a conspiracy is, and whether conspirators actually met. But the court will determine that, right? If the case, of course, survives to the end, if they allow it to be brought to the end. But I'll tell you this. Judging by the documented facts, something happened that by all appearances is a conspiracy. Let's move for a second to the Clinton era. So, in the 1990s, Bill Clinton signed key decisions that brought the Democratic Party closer to big Wall Street money. At the same time, a system of political connections was built between the State Department, the intelligence community, and the party machine, which wanted to use state resources in the interests of the political group. Hillary Clinton, while serving as Secretary of State under Obama, took this system to a whole new level. The Clinton Foundation accepted money from foreign governments while she was managing U.S. foreign policy. Let me emphasize once again, in case someone missed it, she was managing U.S. foreign policy. And at the same time, the foundation, which, as they say, was tied to her personal wealth, yes, it's a public foundation, but the personal well-being of the Clinton family depended on it. They received a lot of money from there, and that's where those very people who were trying to lobby their interests in the U.S. contributed money. All of this is documented, it's not even disputed. The only question is whether this is a criminal offense, that is, whether one can be forced to fit the other, or as they say, the court simply won't be able to pull one idea over. So, money was going to the Clinton Foundation, and on the other hand, the United States of America was doing something for someone that they shouldn't have done, solely because the Clinton Foundation was getting money. A turning point. Donald Trump announces his presidential candidacy. For the people who ran the country like their own personal domain, this is not just a political threat, it's a threat to their lives. Trump is not part of the system. What does that mean? He doesn't owe them anything. If he wins, he will start, or might start, asking uncomfortable questions. And then something happens that is now documented by declassified materials. The CIA receives intelligence from their Dutch colleagues. Clinton herself organized the narrative about Trump's ties to Russia to distract attention from her own problems. CIA Director John Brandon is well aware of this. He personally passes this information to Obama and Biden. The briefing is documented with handwritten notes by the CIA director. What happens next? Instead of stopping the investigation into Trump as politically motivated, Brandon continues it. Moreover, he knows it's a hoax, but he continues to investigate. He includes materials from Steele's dossier in the official intelligence. The dossier, which, well, he definitely knows was paid for by Hillary Clinton's company. There is no evidence. They just made up a bunch of crap. Sorry, the dossier, which Brandon himself called unreliable. That's how it sounds in Russian. Well, that's, so to speak, how they put it. Guys, it looks like it's a lie. He said this in private conversations, but publicly he said very clearly, we need to take this seriously. The FBI under Comey launches Operation Hurricane. Agents infiltrate Trump's circle and the election campaign is underway. So, compared to this, Watergate, that's nothing. Wiretap warrants were obtained through the FISA court based on the same Steele dossier, but the court, the judges, were not told where it came from. In other words, the political origins of this dossier. The result. The president-elect of the United States was elected despite all their scheming. For 2 years, he has been under the cloud of an investigation that was fabricated by his political opponents using government resources. Well, you immediately want to ask, what did this lead to for America? For those who forgot or didn't know, right? First, it set a precedent. For the first time in U.S. history, the government apparatus was publicly used to discredit first a candidate and then a sitting president. This destroyed the norm that had sustained American democracy for, 230 years second. It led to polarization. And it was already like that. But here, half the country believed that Trump was an agent of a foreign state, an enemy, Putin, and the other half believed it was the FSB. Well, the FBI, FSB, the FBI, and CIA are working against us, and for someone else, maybe for some part of us, but against the country. Both sides had reasons for their beliefs, because they were deliberately told exactly that, Well, through controlled channels, exactly what I just told you. Third is international damage. Internal matters are more important, but this is also a factor. Foreign policy decisions were made with an eye on the home front, on the domestic political game. Allies were losing trust in America's word, and opponents were getting a real-time look at America's divisions. Television shows, hey, come here quickly with some sunflower seeds. Let's watch what's happening in America. This is the catastrophe that the conspiracy led to, not a conspiratorial one, but a documented one. Bell, please. Friends, I ask you to do one thing right now. Click the bell so you don't miss the continuation of this topic. On my channel, Roadmap Urban Freedom, I analyze exactly these kinds of stories. How the system works, how it breaks down, and what it means for each of us. One more request. Write in the comments one word, conspiracy or coincidence, one of the two. Yes, well, you can clarify how you personally assess what happened, because this will be, well, one of the main topics of conversation in the coming 6 months. Well, let's say at the very least, across our media landscape, right? By the way, I read every comment, and now to the most interesting part. The Republicans are stumbling. 2025, Trump returns to the White House. What many have been waiting for over the past 8 years begins, an attempt to hold accountable those who orchestrated Russiagate. It would seem that everything is in place. The documents are declassified and the witnesses are ready to speak. Congress gave criminal referrals to the FBI under new leadership, but immediately one striking detail became clear. There are catastrophically few experienced prosecutors. You might ask, how can that be? Do you remember what I said earlier? Republicans mainly entered private business, while Democrats went into government. And now it's come back to haunt us. When people were needed who know how to handle complex federal cases involving perjury and conspiracy against the United States, it turned out that the bench was almost empty. So what happened next? The first 2 cases were filed in haste. Against Comey for false testimony, against Letitia James in Virginia. The cases were real but procedurally weak. The evidence of intent was insufficient for federal court. And this is where the so-called second factor comes into play, the so-called grand juries in Washington, D.C. Grand juries, 23 ordinary citizens, kind of a random selection, but in Washington only 6% of the votes were cast for Trump, so the random selection is actually 94%, or really 99% against him. This is a 100% anti-Trump jury. Well, okay, 99% hate Trump.
И стоп, 99% всего.
The jurors look at the cases and see what the media has been showing them for years. Trump is conducting a political persecution, and they refuse to indict. This happens once, twice, 3 times. In February of 26, a grand jury in D.C., the District of Columbia, refused to indict 6 Democratic congressmen, whom Trump publicly called insurgents. They refused, even though the evidence was simple and public, and the signal was sent out loud and clear right away. Politically charged cases won't get through a jury in Washington. Add to that the fact that the Senate, under the leadership of Thune, well, the Republican majority, couldn't hand over Brandon's Senate testimony transcripts to the prosecutors for 3 months. Because Thune prefers to negotiate with the Democrats in a nice gentlemanly way, so as not to waste time on voting. Or maybe he's involved himself, or maybe his associates are, and they're just as afraid of Trump as the Democrats are. The result of the first year, several high-profile defeats, demoralized prosecutors, triumphant Democrats, and a sense that time is slipping away. A change of strategy. After the dismissal of Attorney General Bondi, a decision was made that changes everything. The entire structure of the case. Instead of separate charges against individual people, there is now a single conspiracy case. This is a key change. I'll explain why right now. Brandon's lie to Congress in 2023 is an overt act within the ongoing conspiracy. That is, it didn't end 5, 6, 7 years ago, it continued under public law. Each new act is part of the conspiracy. It extends the statute of limitations. That means prosecution is possible. 2023 plus 5 equals 2028. That means we still have 2 years. There's no need to rush, hurry, or get nervous. And a person appeared who decided to take this on, Joseph D. DeGenova. He's 81 years old, by the way, not a boy, not young. He started as a prosecutor with Ronald Reagan, and in 1987 he was appointed prosecutor of the District of Columbia. Well, that's Washington. And in 4 years, he handled cases that are still studied in law schools today. In 2018, he publicly said something that at the time seemed like, well, a fabrication, an exaggeration, that Brandon colluded with the FBI and the Department of Justice to fabricate cases against Trump. He understood everything intuitively, and now, with hundreds of documents declassified, his words look like an accurate description of reality. So he's an intuitive person, someone who can reason clearly, and with some data, he can reconstruct the full picture. That's a rare quality, by the way. D. Genova is a legal architect, a person who knows how to build complex multi-level cases, exactly what is needed here right now. His strategy is fundamentally different from what was done before him. He moves the case from Washington to Fort Pierce, Florida, where a grand jury is formed from a different electorate. Judge Eileen Cannon works there, a person known for strictly following procedural rules and for not being politically dependent on the Democratic establishment. Instead of proving a specific lie on a specific day, he builds a picture of a systemic conspiracy. Brennan, Clapper, Comey, not 3 separate people who did something wrong, but participants in a single criminal enterprise directed first against the candidate, then against the sitting president, and mainly against us, the citizens of the United States who elected this president. This is fundamentally stronger from a legal standpoint. Continuation of prognostic. There aren't enough experienced federal prosecutors. Those who left were replaced by people with political loyalty but no experience. This was evident in the April chaos. Subpoenas were issued and withdrawn 3 days later because the team wasn't prepared for the consequences. Genova's age is both a strength and a vulnerability. Wisdom, strategic vision, and understanding of the system are all there. But the marathon of interrogations, late-night briefings, and instant procedural decisions, this is a job for young legs. There's a way out, and it's becoming clear. By bringing in prosecutors from the Republican states of Texas, Florida, and Tennessee, they've raised a generation of experienced criminal prosecutors who know how to work in a state courtroom. State laws are different from federal ones, but retraining for federal specifics is a matter of months, not years. If this team is assembled, then Genova as a strategist plus young prosecutors from the states, is a working model. Strike. The first target is Brennan, the man who made the decision to include the fake dossier in the official intelligence assessment, knowing its origin. If it's proven, the entire narrative that Russiagate was a legitimate investigation collapses. They called it something else. We call it Russiagate. Well, like Watergate, right? Russiagate. The second target is Comey and his people at the FBI, everyone who ran Operation Hurricane. Their correspondence has already been declassified, and ladies and gentlemen, oh my God. The third target, a broader circle, those who knew about Clinton's plan back in July 2016 and didn't stop the operation. But this reaches the level of the Obama-era White House. I don't want to say it will reach Obama's level because when it comes to presidents, we have our own issue there, an issue in terms of charging and putting them on trial. Every charge brought creates a new wave of public attention, and every court case is an opportunity to bring documented facts into the public sphere that currently exist only in classified and declassified documents. which of course most Americans read. They have, as they say, plenty of other things to do. It is the court, not congressmen or journalists, that makes the facts real for the average citizen. Vasya or John may have written something, but here the court has made a decision. They went to the appeals court, and the appeals court said, no, 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 no. That's when it clicks in the citizen's mind. Oh, so that's how it really is. A trial is also a kind of drama. It's an oath. It's cross-examination. It's real people speaking under the threat of criminal prosecution for lying. We still don't know if they'll allow cameras or not, but I think the prosecutors will really try to make sure they're allowed. When this starts, and it's a matter of months, public opinion will begin to change slowly. Well, like after Watergate, irreversibly. The 1926 midterm elections will be held at this level, and that matters. Roadmap to freedom. Before I move on to the finale, one more request. Find the link in the description. You can download my book for free, and after downloading, you will receive short 10-minute videos by email every day, also for free. This is my critical thinking system, and it's what helps me understand stories like these, and even more than just stories, and in promises, in offers, in messages, on your own, without relying on what you are told in the mass media. There will be a link under the video, and once again, it's free. Optimism. I don't want to end on Brennan or Didsanov. I want to end on America, on all of us. Because it all happened in February 1926. 23 ordinary citizens in Washington. In a city where 94% vote for Democrats, the administration was denied an indictment against 6 congressmen. They decided that there wasn't enough evidence and no one can punish them for that. No one can punish them for that. I really didn't like it, but we can't punish them. And in April, another citizen, career prosecutor Maria Medjetti Sloan, came to her bosses and said, I don't see strong evidence. I can't do this. I don't believe in this case. She was fired, but she said it. They didn't fire her completely. They just took her off the project, so she looked for work elsewhere. And before her, dozens of employees from the CIA, FBI, and Congress came and gave testimony. Against Obama, against Hillary, against Comey, against Brennan, against their own bosses, against their own agencies that were in Kyiv. They would then have to testify under oath, knowing that it would ruin their careers. They still went anyway. They secretly wrote her a letter, went and said, Guys, I'm ready to put my photo, my signature, and everything else, but I'm outraged by what's happening right now. Just try to imagine something like that happening in China, Iran, Venezuela, Russia, or North Korea. There, a person who tells the truth against the system will disappear, not metaphorically, but literally disappear, and that's it. One day they're there, the next they're gone. In America, yes, some people lose their jobs. It's tough, it's unfair. Others get yelled at and looked at with disdain. But he remains free, and his words stay in the records, and later they serve as a basis for action. That's exactly what democracy is. Well, not perfect. There are no perfect democracies. Not always working, slow, awkward, often irritating, but alive. Because there are people in it who aren't afraid to say no. I want to say once again, I've said it many times already, I don't like democracy, but as they say, we live in it. And so let's say it's not the worst thing that can happen to you. Yes, democracy. And so let's say thankfully it does sometimes protect us, at least partially, slowly, very slowly. The deep state has taken over the prosecutor's office, universities, the FBI, the CIA, newspapers. It's true. It's all true. And at the same time, they couldn't take over everything because you can't take over, let's call it human conscience. I don't know how to put it more precisely. You can't take it over. It turned out there were 23 jurors who came to court and said no. Again, I really didn't like that. But they left because they made that decision. They chose that path. You can't take over a prosecutor who refused to sign something he doesn't believe in. And again, I didn't like it again, but, well, no means no. Who knows what was going on there? Maybe, as they say, the kids rebelled and spoke up. We'll leave home if you keep doing this. The person came and said, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore, and left. Publicly, by all the rules, in court, and that's the best reason for optimism that I know. Until next time. Subscribe. Don't forget, of course, share it with those you think it matters to. And remember, to understand means to be free, or at least the first step to freedom is understanding. Goodbye.